This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest of honor, Paul Ferguson. Some of you may know him as clerk of the Circuit Court of Arlington and Falls Church. Others of you may remember him with fondness as a prior member of the county board. But those of you who really know what's important in life know that he was vice chair for precinct operations under Kevin Appel. We're just so glad that he could take a few minutes out of this busy primary day to come and talk to us. Paul, do you want to say a few words first, and then we'll pepper you with questions?
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that introduction. And it is relevant today because people ask me how I got my start. And I say, I used to have the same position that Carol Fontaine had. And they go, wow, you were like Carol Fontaine. Of course, no wonder you made it. So people wouldn't even put me as close to her league as far as, the power structure. But those of us that know Carol, if you're a candidate and you had her support, you've likely got a good chance, given her many years at precinct ops. So one of the things that's tough about being with you by GoToMeeting or virtually rather than being in person, when people are sort of nodding off or not interested, I can always look them at the eye and yell at them or say, hey, we want me to talk about something different. So at any point, if I'm rambling on or I'm talking about something that you'd rather see me talk about something different, I'm glad to do that, and I'd rather it be an interactive discussion. Those of you that have heard me speak before know that I often start with my quote, Tony Kornheiser. Tony was someone's scraping something like they're eating, which is fine for me to eating, but it's like scraping chalk down a blackboard or something. So ask if they could mute or cut that off. No problem. So I always Tony Kornheiser. When I saw him speak, he said, okay, you've paid me the $10,000. Now you can ask me anything you want. And he doesn't give any speech. He just says, I'm answering questions. But boy, is that guy entertaining. And he doesn't necessarily answer the questions that you ask him, but he always gives you something that's worth listening to. So I strive to do that. Bob asked me to talk about what it was like in our office and how we adjusted with the pandemic. I actually feel like it's an interesting story, and I would like to try to tell it to you briefly. But before I do that, I just want to know, is there anything that any of you would like to ask or is on your mind before I start talking or would prefer me to talk about? All right, well, you're going to let me tell my hopefully brief story about the circuit court adjusting to the pandemic. When we hit the first week of March, some of my employees were starting to get nervous, and they said, well, what if we're afraid to come to work? And I said, well, then you won't have a job. I mean, like we have to continue to operate the courts. And I thought maybe the old coronavirus thing was overblown. Of course, we had our president telling us that it was just a few people and not to worry about it. And of course, I trust my president, so I thought, well, this will be fine. This is not going to be as big a deal as people are saying. And then I noticed my employees getting more and more nervous. So keep in mind, this is like the first week of March, like March 3rd, March 4th or so. And so I am not a managerial guru. Some people would say that I took this job as clerk of the circuit court without maybe sufficient management experience and did a lot of on-the-job learning. But the most important thing I think you can do is listen to your employees. And I don't always do that as well as I should. So what I did, along with my chief deputy, Christina Dietrich, we met with each employee one by one, and we wanted to know why they were concerned. And by the end of that 2-day period, meeting with all 30 employees, we said, we've got to close the office down. We're in a different position than I thought. And so that was before there was like the real shutdown had sort of started nationwide. Of course, the president at the time took a long time to adapt. But I would say by the middle of March, much of the country had shut down. Certainly in New York it had. So me closing the circuit court doors was sort of a big deal. I tried to tell people, well, I'm actually open, but you just can't come in the office. So we're trying to deal with them from the outside. My office did not have any plexiglass protecting any of the employees. It was all completely open. And my predecessor, David Bell, always with pride told me that you'll see some places like Fairfax and Alexandria where there's complete plexiglass up, but I feel that decreases the connection between the person working and whoever they're helping. And I had completely agreed with him. But then once the pandemic hit, I said to Dave, I wish we had the plexiglass like Fairfax and Alexandria, because now we don't have really any protection for the employees. So General District Court did have that plexiglass. So what I did was ask if they of course didn't close. I said, can I open up there with a window doing some limited operations 3 hours a day in the mornings? So we issued, we said on our website that the doors are closed, but if you want to walk in and do a marriage license, concealed weapons permit, or get your notary, which seemed to be the three things that most people wanted to visit our office for, you can come down to General District Court between 9 and 12. Now, I only had one employee volunteer to serve the public with me, and I'll never forget that employee, Erica Sosa, who just was either as stupid as I was or brave or wanted a promotion. So she and I issued all the marriage licenses, the gun permits, and the notaries. I would say that she did most of it with me being her assistant, because on a regular basis, I'm not the one at the counter doing all of this and handing out these things to people. But I was able to do some of it and partnered with her. And I remember that some people came with masks. And I said to Erica, boy, these people are really overreacting wearing masks. This is, it's ridiculous. Why are they doing that? And of course, really probably the only valid criticism of Fauci, I hate that he's continuing to get beat up by the Republicans now, was that they said that wearing masks really wasn't necessary. And I don't know if it was because there was a shortage of masks or not. So there was some tension, frankly, between myself and the judges, who weren't sure that I had to unilaterally the power to just shut the doors of my office. I think after about a week of me doing that, I think they realized that I probably did the right thing. They may not have said that, but I think they became more understanding, at least after a week or so, when you saw shutdowns more common nationwide. And then certainly by the third or fourth week of March, really almost all courts had closed their doors like I had, but I felt like I got a little bit ahead of the curve. And then it was also interesting to see some of my counterparts who maybe toughed it out a little more than I did not close their doors right away, and they simply opened up much faster than I did. I did not open my doors back to the public until Labor Day. The Clerk in Alexandria did not open back up until the spring, so that was probably too long. So some of the things that we did to adjust, the county manager, to his credit, challenged all employees throughout Arlington County, including us at the courts, whatever you do, figure out how to do it virtually. And I tried to explain to him that the code doesn't really necessarily allow that you have to do, it specifically says that for marriage licenses and gun permits that it has to be in person. So I just decided to interpret in person, meaning on the screen like this, and figured if somebody sues me after the fact, and that could still happen, but then we had a order from the chief judge of the Supreme Court who basically said that clerks could do that, and said for all intents and purposes virtual was in person. So probably I won't get sued for that. Marriage licenses, concealed weapons permits, we figured out how to do them all online. It's much more cumbersome. So today, even though we have that technology, we don't advertise that we can do that. If someone, just absolutely has a reason and they contact our office and they want these things remotely, we can do it. But what we had to do is rely a lot on the U.S. Postal Service, and I can go through in detail. But unfortunately, right during the pandemic, the Postal Service was taken over by a man named Mr. DeJoy. And it's amazing how one person could tear down something that worked so well. I mean, literally all of a sudden, and it wasn't the pandemic, in 2020, mail that used to take a couple days, as most of you know, could sometimes take weeks. So what we would do is tell people that wanted a marriage license, we can mail it to you after the fact, but for some people that wasn't good enough if they were trying to get married right away. So we, told them you had to apply online, which worked for most people, but not all, because not all were computer savvy. So we still, could take things in a box right by the door. We could still, we would say anything that you cannot do virtually, come put it in this box right by our door, and we'll stamp things in multiple times during the day. Now, if somebody needed a document right away and they contacted me, I could stamp it there and do it right there for them, but I was trying not to do that too much. But amazingly, one of the things I learned, and I don't know how all of you are going to feel about this, the people who were really the nicest and understanding and most friendly were the concealed weapons permits applications. My staff decided that they weren't necessarily comfortable with saying in-person means on the screen. So I got to do every one of them. So for every person, for about a 4 or 5 month period, I connected with them by screen. And so it required me to sort of set up meetings with them, get to know these people. And amazingly, most of them were just really friendly and supportive and understanding of the fact that we had to do this virtually, and it was going to take a little bit longer to get their gun permit. What was a little scary is I realized that the majority of people applying for gun permits are 21. I think it's like a rite of passage. A lot of these young men, you have to be 21 to get a gun permit, and they turn 21 and maybe they just say to their buddies, hey, you can get a gun permit. So I did a lot of them for very young people, which was a little depressing for me when I was looking at the birth dates and realizing that their birth dates were in the 90s after I had already started my career on the county board. So we took the county manager's challenge. It was a little more cumbersome, but we were able to do everything remotely. Anybody that needed anything, we were able to provide it by them sort of waiting outside the doors and us going to help them. Unfortunately, it really, when you use the word equity, it was not as equitable as it could be, because you would see people, especially low income, not English speaking, still coming to our door wanting to just do walk-in marriage license appointments. And we were telling people, look, you need to fill out all the information online. So we tried to accommodate them where we could, but there was a limit to what we could do. And I also had a feeling that a lot of them were coming from other jurisdictions. It's very easy to come in from DC or Maryland to get a marriage license in Arlington, compared to the cumbersome process there. I'm not allowed to serve Arlingtonians faster, but if I knew you were from Arlington, I might hop on it a little faster. Let's just say.
What about the courts as a whole? What about the courts as a whole? Were there jury trials? Were there bench
I'm glad you asked that question, Bob. Both our prosecutor, Parissa Degani-Tofty, and our judges felt that grand juries needed to continue on despite COVID. So that was very difficult. We have the grand jury the last Monday of the month. and I had to get grand jurors to come in to the courthouse to only do Parissa limited it down to about 15 indictments, but she said these indictments just had to go forward. I went through, this was the first year. Some of you have served as a grand juror before, and if you haven't, you should serve again. Remind me, and maybe we'll put you on the list. But I see Herschel laughing. It's not always the most interesting experience, but it is. And you do have a over 70 out if you want to.
I served. I got sent home.
Right, because Theo didn't want you. Was that it, or what?
She thought I was. The campaign had just occurred.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, there was a time when Theo thought I was too close, but not
Yes.
anymore.
I've been on the list for 2 years and I haven't been called yet.
Really?
Yes.
Well, we'll don't be surprised if that's fixed somewhat quickly in the near future. You may be
Write down his name. It's Microsoft account.
Yes, right. It's supposed to be random, but you never know. Anyway, we did have that. I would say getting those grand jurors in March was one of the toughest things I had to do during the pandemic, because people would say they couldn't come, and I cycled through the whole list. So this was the first year that of our 120 people that we have on the list for grand jury, some people I had to call twice, because I had enough people that just said I can't do this for really good reasons, and it was always a concern, a medical concern, not just age. In April, we didn't have any indictments, fortunately, but grand juries continued on really at a reduced rate. I had to get grand jurors in every month except for April and May, where Parissa felt she didn't have anything that had to go forward. You asked if juries continued. We did not have any jury trials until I think we had our first one in April of this year. So we went a year without having any jury trials, which I think is questionable constitutionally as far as the right to speedy trial. Parissa would have to tell you how she dealt with all of those cases. I think whether you agree with Parissa's new approach as a prosecutor, with COVID, it really was somewhat timely, because she was reviewing all the cases that were needing to be prosecuted, and I don't think she felt every one of them that was on deck for her to be prosecuted had to be prosecuted. So that helped she started in January of 2020 and the pandemic hit in March. But it was hard for people that would maybe have a civil jury trial. They just, if you had a car accident or something like that, you're just going to have to wait over a year to have your trial. We've since had 2 civil jury trials, and we've had 4 or 5 criminal trials go forward. And Parissa, of course, is not prosecuting at quite a higher rate as was done before. So there are a little bit less jury trials to begin with. She had a trial on Monday. I don't know if any of you saw it in the paper. That I thought was going to be the biggest trial of her short career as a prosecutor. It was a murder trial that looked to almost certain to go forward. We had to call in over 100 jurors, and at the very last minute, the defendant decided to accept the plea agreement, which sometimes happens in these cases. He pleaded guilty to, and he could be sentenced to up to 45 years in prison. So it's now in Judge Newman's hands. He'll do the sentencing in September. So that's kind of our story. I thought we were closed a little bit more than some jurisdictions, but certainly open more than some, let's say Alexandria, and I know Rockingham was stayed closed for a long period of time. The technology improvements help because we're able to serve people remotely if we have to, but we also have to rely on the mail, which we don't want to do. So we encourage everyone to come in person.
What lessons do you think you've learned that have had a lasting impact beyond the pandemic? So did anything you start?
Listen to your employees. I mean, you know, my employees were ahead of the curve where I was. I mean, I wasn't as worried about it. They were. So, you know, take time to hear why they have a concern. And I wish I would have maybe even a week or two earlier did what I did and close the doors to the public. The second lesson is that when people say something can't be done by technology, they maybe need to rethink it, because I use those words. I was like, you know, the code says it's in person. Well, you know, just interpret it different and try to use technology to do what had to be done in person. And I think that was a lesson for a lot of people with the pandemic. So those would be my biggest takeaways.
Your office is at a very interesting interface between the judicial and executive branch. And there are a lot of things that were addressed by governor executive orders. Probably 99% of the COVID rules came out of Ralph Northam's office. And yet you were in that interesting crack between the governor and the judicial branch of Virginia.
Let me say, I appreciate everything the governor did. We were helped by the governor, the governor's order, because I took my action 1 week before he did, but once I had the governor's action, it helped me a lot with the public and with my judges to explain, look, I'm following what the governor has said here that we should be doing. So I just thank goodness we had a Democrat as a governor. I mean, if I had had someone like Governor Kemp in Georgia, I would have had conflicts with people coming in and out. You know, so Joe.
Just to follow up on Bob's question, I helped set up the IT commission and worked closely with Jack Belcher, who actually he got people off of the mainframes and did a whole lot of updating for all.
I remember you doing that, Joe. You were kind of like our Y2K guy too, right? You know.
Right. Well, anyway, the question is, what did Jack Belcher do for you? Were there things that you would have liked for him to have done? Just kind of a feeling of how well the office technology supported the constitutional officers.
I really appreciate you asking that, because I got to give him a lot of credit, and I got to give the county manager a lot of credit. The courts over here in general, the general district court and the juvenile domestic relations court, didn't have any technology staffers, and they didn't have the ability in the courtroom to do remote hearings. So I should have said that hearings took place, but they were all done remotely. We didn't have jury trials, but court criminal cases even before the judge had to continue. Small, I mean, I shouldn't say small, but civil matters without a jury were able to continue. Divorces were able to continue with using remote technology. And we had some technology that allowed it in circuit court, but the general district court and the juvenile court didn't have any at all. So the county manager with Jack Belcher, the county manager authorized emergency funding for us to get the technology that we needed immediately. And Jack Belcher detailed staff over here to help us make it all happen, not just in the circuit court, but in all two of the courts. And then the county manager gave me an extra staff person permanently, starting with COVID, but that is continued on, that is responsible for working in the general district court and the juvenile court. And I manage it because the general district court and the juvenile court are not considered county employees. That goes back to one of the many nice things my predecessor David Bell did for this office was he made our office, along with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office in 1986, considered county employees rather than state employees. And so that just means that the money that comes in from the state goes directly to the county, and the county pays the salaries, but we're county retirees, and that way we get more money basically than the general district court and the juvenile domestic relations court who are state employees. So because there was no county employee positions available in the two other courts, I manage a position that is responsible for helping them. So we just got everything we needed and more, and then the federal assistance helped quite a bit too. There was money that came in that we had to use immediately to retrofit these courtrooms so that remote hearings could take place. So all of our courtrooms throughout the courthouse now can conduct remote hearings. And in addition, for this big murder trial yesterday, we were going to have you can't let that many people in the courtroom, but people still should have the right to watch a trial like a murder trial, especially the family members, victims, family members of the defendant. And then there's all kinds of law students or interns that they want to watch a trial like that. So they were all here in an overflow courtroom. We had a separate courtroom that was able to watch the trial closed circuit. And fortunately for the public, because agreement is always a good thing, but for all these students that came in to watch the trial, they had to go home because the trial was a plea agreement yesterday. So thank you. The county manager, Jack Belcher, was outstanding, and so was the county manager.
Let me just say, my experience on grand jury was really one of the more interesting things in my whole life. And I must say that this was a long time ago, and that at that time, when there was a rape issue, if it was a he said, she said situation, the grand jury just dismissed it. And it really is kind of too bad that was the situation then. And I think that at least there's been some progress since that was 40 years ago.
Funny story about, I'm sure all of you remember Ann Ross. She was one of our best Democrats. And she told me that, Paul, there was a time when none of us progressive Democrats, I forget liberal Democrats was but what she called themselves, would ever have been on a grand jury. She said the Byrd machine, she said there was conflicts within the Democratic committee, and there was no way in anything that anybody that wouldn't just automatically indict was going to be on a grand jury. So she said that was a big change when David Bell came on in 1977. The clerk doesn't pick the grand jurors. The judges pick the grand jurors, but if the judges don't have enough names, the clerk's got to find some names for the judge. I mean, the judge signs off on anything that we give them, and then oftentimes clerks draft names for judges. That's just sort of the way it works. So it depends on the judge whether they're going to give me a lot of names or not. I always used to laugh. Jim Allman's son Brady was a swimmer, a star swimmer. If you go to the Yorktown swimming pool, there's still some records, of course, held by Dolan, Tom Dolan, who was an Olympic swimmer, son of Bill Dolan, and then Brady Allman. And so Jim would give me the swim directory for Overlay Pool, and he would just highlight the names. And so people would say, why am I here? And I'd say, do you swim at Overlay Pool? Do you know the Allmans? And they go, yeah. I go, I have a feeling I know why you're here. You're on the list. So,
well, I think right after I won the swim contest with Kathy Bell that I got on the list.
Kathy Bell, yeah, that was mine too.
You're
Well,
talking
you know, they always say that you can, if you're a good prosecutor, you can indict a ham sandwich.
Yes.
The entire time I served on the grand jury, there wasn't a single sandwich brought into the jury room or indicted.
We should probably bring in sandwiches for the grand jurors. I like them to go out and get some air, but sometimes the lady that works for the prosecutor doesn't want them to get any break, so I have to battle her. But.
you're talking about grand jurors, but they used to choose jurors that way. I'm pretty sure that I was on the list for juries because I worked at the Bureau of the Budget, that somebody had used the list of employees at the Bureau of the Budget, the directory.
For a regular jury, which is called a petit juror, that would be illegal. And so if that's,
I'm pretty sure in the early 70s.
Yeah, I mean, the clerk, there's a lot of trust that people have in the clerk. You know, I mean, we're supposed to do things a certain way, and if I did them a different way, people, you know, most people, there wouldn't be a way for people to find out.
Well, I don't know what the law was in the early 70s, but
it was designated to be a random jury then too. I mean, but that being said, the clerk does control the jury list, so the clerk can figure out who to summons whoever they want. It's supposed to be.
I served on a petite jury, and it's funny because when I first graduated from law school, it was very common for lawyers to be excused for like cause.
Yeah.
And that sort of changed. And the reason why I got on the jury is I think they ran out of peremptory challenges. So I actually served in Alexandria in the federal court.
You know, Bob, you raise an interesting point. If you look at the Virginia Code, it says that licensed practicing attorneys shall, not may, shall be excused. And so when I became clerk, you know, I looked at that and I kind of worried. I was like, maybe we shouldn't really be summoning in, you know, if they say they're, you know, there's lots of attorneys who are not practicing law. So, but if you're actually in the practice of law, I sort of read that to believe that you should not be on a jury. And I think there's a reason for that legislation, because a lawyer on a jury could be more influential, possibly overbearing on the other jurors. And so that's the way I read it. And our judges told me, you're crazy. That's not what we're going to do, because if we did that, we wouldn't have hardly any jurors. You know, I said, well, there's lots of people that don't practice, so they go, that's not how we do things. So to cover myself, I asked for an opinion from the Attorney General, who was Ken Cuccinelli. I hated to ask anything of Ken Cuccinelli, and I asked Ken Cuccinelli, and he wrote back and said, no, that's discretionary. That if lawyers, you know, that's a weight. He says, that's a waivable right. That if somebody is a licensed practicing attorney and they want to serve, and they can serve. So I always wonder if I now asked another attorney general what they thought, what there would be the result. But you don't ask a question unless you really want a different answer, and I'm fine with the attorneys serving, because I don't want to lessen my jury pool, and neither did my judges, and probably my judges didn't appreciate that I even asked for the attorney general opinion, but I felt like it was on me, and I didn't want to get in trouble, just in case I was doing it incorrectly.
I'll say in my own defense that even though I sat on the jury here in Virginia, I'm licensed in DC and not Virginia, so I got around it that way.
But the code says licensed practicing attorney. It doesn't say that you have to be licensed in Virginia. I mean, that's
fair. That's fair. Okay.
Anyway, sometimes, you know, you read it and you have a literal meaning of what it says, or sometimes it's a interpretation, I guess. Just like I viewed in person to also be on the screen.
Yes.
I haven't been called for jury duty in Arlington since the early 70s, but I was on a federal courthouse jury a couple years ago, about 5
Who
years.
was the judge? Who was the judge, Herschel?
I can't remember his name, which means it's not somebody who came from Arlington.
Yeah, well, that I can't. When I hear somebody say what you just said, Herschel, I can't fix that. I mean, it's a random process, and what I tell people is that you have approximately a 12 to 13% chance every year of getting one of those jury questionnaires, and the fact that you haven't got one from 30 years doesn't increase your odds. Each year you have a 12 or 13% chance. So your number might never come up. Some people seem to hit it every 3 or 4 years, but it's like if you think of a wheel spinning around, everybody's information is mixed up every year, so that you have the same chance every year being sent a jury questionnaire for potential service.
But of course, if DeJoy stays in office, you might be sending him jury questionnaires, but he'll never receive them.
Yeah, I'm hoping DeJoy's days are numbered. You would think that with the investigation and with Biden appointing new people, but I also read that there was that part of the bipartisan negotiations on whatever they're trying to be bipartisan on has to do with DeJoy, that Republicans still want him in there. I'm surprised that Republicans would even want him there, because their constituents need to get mail too. But anyway.
They want the Postal Service to be privatized.
Yeah, that's true. If I could I mean, I know this isn't a book group, but if there's one book I read over the last few years that I think is a must read, it's called The Fifth Risk by Michael Lewis. Michael Lewis read a lot of different things in Moneyball, but the Big Short was him too. He details all these governmental agencies and how basically through either there was just complete neglect, or the people that wanted them privatized, Trump would put in there to try to tear it down. So it was really quite a book. And for any of you that have worked in government, the government workers are the heroes of the book.
Paul and Bob, I've got to excuse myself. I've got to pick up my daughter at the airport. So thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate it, and sorry to have to cut this short.
Nice to see you. And I saw Inta Peak on there for a minute too. She's on our grand jury list. She's on all our lists.
She's on everyone's list. She's
No
very
doubt
much in demand.
she had a bad connection. She's my technology guru.
Yeah. All right. Thanks,
Okay.
Derek. Good to see you
Bye-bye,
guys.
guys.
Okay, are there other questions for Paul?
Well, I actually was a little surprised that you have I sort of thought you worked for the judges, but apparently they work for.
I work for you, Herschel. I work for the people.
But
I'm elected independently, and now I don't work for the judges, but if I'm not on a good relationship with the judges, they could make my life very difficult. But that being said, there are a few, jurisdictions where the clerks and the judges do not get along, and the clerk can make things very difficult for the judges too. So I actually feel that of the two, the judges have trouble hitting back because they can't really speak in public. So it really behooves the judges to have good relationships with their clerk, I'd say. Not that I take that approach. I'm very deferential to our judges, and fortunately, each of our 4 judges I consider a friend. Where at some point, I mean, I can go through them individually, but Bill Newman was our county board member, of course, and remember him working with him there. Dan Fiore, you talked about me being head of precinct ops. He was the Lyon Park precinct ops person, and sometimes I'd have to get on him that he wasn't doing all that I wanted him to do. So he was part of our democratic structure. Louise DiMatteo was in the office of the county attorney when I was a county board member. So I worked with her in that role and know her well. And then, of course, Judy Wee was the president of the Young Democrats when I was the membership chairman in 1988. So we go back a long ways, and proud that she's a judge now.
Who sets the budget for the clerk's office?
Well, when people say I'm independent, the county manager has quite a bit of sway over me because he is in charge of how much money I get. Now, the state, I would say the state funds. When I first started, they funded half my budget. Now it's probably 35 to 38%. There was some funding formulas that changed that made it more difficult for localities. So we get a lot of money in from the state. When I say a lot, close 35 to 40%. That money all goes to the county, and then everything else I need, the county gives me. So the salaries statewide of employees for clerk's offices are quite low. And I would say that they're at least doubled by what Arlington County gives me. And so I'm like the new technology that I get, I don't get that from the state. The county gives that to me. There's this technology trust fund that's a $5 fee on every civil case that's filed. $4 of that goes back to the locality. $1 of that goes to a pot for rural jurisdictions. Well, so I sign that money all straight over to the county, but that's a fraction of all the technology money that Jack Belcher and Mark Schwartz give me that I need to function. And then just as a story, as far as outrageousness, during the 2009 budget, and my Republican clerks always point out, they always needle me that this was Tim Kaine was the governor. My Republican counterparts always point out to me that Tim Kaine's budget was the worst budget that clerks ever had. Well, there was the worst budget for everybody. We were in a free fall economically, and there was a Republican legislature who made life very difficult on Tim Kaine, is what I try to tell them. But anyway, this technology trust fund money is just outrageous. That money is supposed to go directly to the localities. Well, during that budget crisis, the state just swiped that money. They said, it's sitting here in a pot, and it actually goes through the state coffers first. So even though it's supposed to be, people think that they're paying the $5 extra on the civil case, and it goes, they just took all the money. So we've had to fight to get that money back over the last 10 years. And Governor McAuliffe was helpful. Governor Northam's helpful. This year's legislature has been helpful, but they still haven't restored 100% of it. They came close this year, but there's still $1 million of that money every year statewide that goes from this $5 fee that the state has misappropriated, as far as I'm concerned. So the other thing they did in that budget year was there's a certain amount of money that the state gives you each year, but then the urban counties produce far more money for the state than the rural counties. So they give a minimum amount to each office based on staffing. Then when you've given all that money back to the state, then they start sharing it with the locality. So it used to be that 2/3 of the money went to the locality and 1/3 to the state, and that helped offset this money that the localities and the urban jurisdictions have to funnel into their court system. Well, in 2009, they just decided we're going to change that. It's now 2/3 to the state and 1/3 to the county, and all what that was just a money grab from the urban jurisdictions, from local governments. So the local governments had to pick up the bill, or the clerk's office had to make severe cuts. Fortunately, in my case, the local government just picked up the extra money that they had to pay.
I found it interesting that you said you owe all this to the county manager as opposed to the county board.
That
mean,
is
you-
interesting, but
Well,
I have,
if you
it's true.
have,
County managers, the what, like I called the county manager, and those of you realize that the county manager has a lot more power than the county board members have. I mean, the
well,
county
but
manager,
if the county manager decided he wanted to give you less than you thought you needed, you could go to the county board, and there's
okay,
have been not I don't know about clerk of the court, but there have been constitutional officers who have done that over the years.
I have done it also. I really have tried hard not to, because I feel that that's an awkward. Unlike other constitutional officers, since I actually served on the board, I try to minimize putting the board in an awkward position of me asking. But I had to do it, frankly, this year. There was our land records transactions with the buying and selling of properties, and Amazon have just gone to the roof. Literally, it's increased by 75%. And so I needed a new position there, and Schwartz had already funded me the technology position as a new position. So he felt like, I can't do two for the circuit court. So he still helped me with the board, and that the board members, I should put this delicately, this board, they highly value the advice of the county manager. So he wasn't able to put my request in the budget, but when the board asked him, what did they think of it? He said, this was close. This is one I would have liked to have funded, but ran out of money. So if you, the board, see fit to fund the clerk's request, this would be a better one than some. So they did put it, the county board did put it in my budget, but I still appreciated the assist. If the county manager hadn't said that, I would have really had to press hard, and I'm not sure they would have done it, frankly, even though they're all friends, because they've got a lot of people asking them for money.
Do you have a general optimism for Arlington County as a whole? I mean, we're part of a metropolitan area that faces many incredible challenges. I mean, security around the capital is much worse than it used to be. But on the other hand, we have things like Amazon coming in that enhance property values. If you had to,
general optimism would be an understatement. I think Arlington is more and more recognized as one of the premier localities in the country. I mean, the Amazon, to me, is not a big deal because we have Amazon here. It's because there was this contest. We're close to Washington D.C., so that helps. I mean, but that wasn't just it. I mean, I think the locality in New York where Amazon was going to partially locate, this county board gets credit for not bending to extreme fringes who were saying Amazon was bad, and so this contest where all these evaluating factors were considered, Arlington County came out on top. I mean, this is more and more said nationally that it used to be Portland was one of the localities that Arlington is like, was one of the top 5, and which is the best, Portland or Arlington? Well, now there's no question about it. It's Arlington. I mean, Portland is going through major problems, and not to kick them, but they're it's not where you want to go and move to right now. So Arlington, I feel like this we got a great county manager, we've got a great county board, we've got people from all over the country that want to work here. When I have a vacancy in my office for a lower level position, even I get great applicants. People want to work in Arlington County, and I always ask them, why, and they've said, we've heard of Arlington County, and this might be someone in South Carolina. they've said, I want to work in the DMV area, but I've heard Arlington County is the best place. So I'm just very optimistic. Just little things that have changed over the years for the better. When my kids were young, it used to be that it was always said, well, the fields in Arlington or the athletic facilities, the recreation facilities are better in Fairfax. You know, they just put up Lover Run is just beautiful, that new facility there. So, you know, now it's the opposite. You know, things in Fairfax are run down, and people say, boy, Arlington's great. So you know, we're still live near the Capitol, as you said. So you can never forget what happened with September 11th, where we could have terrorism issues. But for the most part, I'm just incredibly optimistic about our future here.
Well,
Our teachers' salaries are higher too.
Our teachers' salaries are higher. There's no doubts about that.
let me give you a couple of things to think about on the other side. And one is not to do with Arlington, but the future of the possibility of an authoritarian government in the United States.
Yeah. Well,
and but the other is in Arlington.
Everywhere, right? I mean, that's not just Arlington.
Well, but Arlington's near the Capitol and so forth. But the other is a more general thing about urban real estate after the pandemic. And you know, one of my grandsons lives in Brooklyn, and he just got a new job in California, which he works at from Brooklyn, and because he works in his apartment, and just Amazon may, in the long run, for example, not expand in terms of square feet, the number of square feet that they originally had in mind, because they may decide some people, can work half the time at home or something. But not just Amazon, but
there's no doubt we've got too much office space, and that more people are going to work at home. That is a problem, but the space will get repurposed and it'll be rental housing. I mean, we're already at 50. Everywhere else is at a really high residential to commercial ratio, and Arlington always prided itself on the 50-50, and that's gonna eventually in years future be 60-40 or more residential, but that still doesn't mean that the residential is extremely valuable. So.
Okay, and you're saying the residential may be apartment houses that somebody at one point thought were going to be office buildings.
Yeah, sure. That's probably going to
a possible short run adjustment, as the restaurants which have been serving people coming to work, at noon, and there's going to be some kind of a real estate adjustment, I would think. I
think commercial properties are not quite as valuable as we have them, so that's a little bit of a hit for us, but nothing that can't in the long run be overcome. And we still got the federal government presence here too, so that's we've still got the Pentagon no matter what. That's not going away. So we're in better shape than most. Joe?
I have to go, but thank you, Paul. It's been really interesting, and I will, next time I'm talking to Jack Belcher, give him your kudos.
He really has come through, and there, Herschel kidded me about not thanking the board rather than Mark Schwartz or Jack Belcher. Jack does a lot for my office. Like Jack, when I was on the county board, I helped to get the Barcroft softball fields when that was his main issue before he was a county employee. So I think he's had a special spot for me. He has taken care of me just big time over the years, but both with the actual technology, with the advice he's given, and with detailing people over here when we've needed it. So I'm fearful of him retiring you know, and who would be the next person, and I don't have that Jack Belcher relationship.
Right. Well, when we formed the IT commission, I really pushed telecommuting before the pandemic occurred, and it actually kind of helped the county government when the pandemic hit.
Before you took over that commission, Joe, it was called the Cable TV Advisory and Cable
Right.
TV and Technology Advisory Commission. So I think you and your team changed it to the IT.
Right. That's correct. In other words, we made some of the changes off the mainframe when it was a cable TV, but I basically said, hey, this makes no sense. It really is, you know, there's the cable TV, but there's a whole host of other issues, including telecommuting and support for IT systems and so on. So county board agreed, and we changed the terms of reference.
Well,
Okay. Well, could I just point out that Steve has posted in the chat the ACDC Rides to the Poll hotline, and if any of you know someone who needs a ride to the poll today, please share that hotline number with them. I think we've kept Paul long enough, so unless you want to say one or two parting words, perhaps we should wrap up the session, Paul.
You guys are good friends. Thank you for being on the screen, and maybe we can have in the next year, hey, we can have a lunch in person rather than having to do this on screen. So
and we'll tell people they missed a good session. So
well,
Yes.
thanks, Herschel.
although you recorded it, I guess. So
Yeah.
I don't know if too many people will watch it recording, but anyway, it's nice.
Hundreds will.
Nice to you guys. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.